Now is the time for change. Doing business in the 21st century is made possible with Nkonki, external and internal audit assurance providers. Log on to nkonki.com to find out more.
Integrated thinking is the new business buzzword. It refers to efficiently managing all of the capitals used and affected by a business. Now, this will be a benefit to the company and to its key stakeholders. Our guests on the panel today will share their views on how to do integrated thinking. They are Graham Terry from the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants and Mohammed Adam from Eskom. I'm Leigh Roberts, and with me is Mervyn King. Mervyn, the average business relies on various types of capital in its daily operations. Tell us the most commonly used.
Well, in the framework of the International Integrated Reporting Council, we mention 6 capitals: financial, manufactured, human, intellectual, natural capital, and social capital. In that social capital, we also mean it to embrace the ongoing relationship between the company and its stakeholders. So part of integrated thinking is really an acceptance that there is an interconnection and interdependence functionally and operationally in a company between the use of resources and the relationships with stakeholders. So although we mention these 6 capitals, it doesn't of necessity follow that every company uses the 6 capitals.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word acceptance, but really, this is the reality. It's an acceptance of reality, because this is the way you do your business. Mohammed, which are the capitals that are commonly used at Eskom?
Leigh, if you just give me a minute, I'll come to the issue of capitals at Eskom. But I think as a precursor, what I just wanted to mention is, if you look at Eskom, 2 things. Firstly, state-owned company. Secondly, an energy company. And these 2 things have forced us very early to actually apply integrated thinking. So when you're dealing with government as a shareholder, government is interested in affordability of electricity, that you have universal access to electricity. So early on, you're forced, in terms of when KPIs are set, to start thinking across.
Which has been a good thing.
Which is a good thing. If you look at, as an energy company, energy choices, nuclear versus renewable. So you're very much, and you know what the cost implications are. So you're always in the realm of thinking across just financial consequences. If you look at Eskom, all of the capitals are important, but if you ask me to single out what are the most important ones at the moment, or where we're placing a lot of emphasis, it's the one on natural capital, and that relates to the way we generate electricity, the emissions, and the impact on the environment. And also affecting the energy choices as we go forward. It's a big issue for us. And the second is the social and relationship capital. You know, we've had issues around load shedding, our reputation. We continue engaging with stakeholders to explain what is happening. We try to do so in a transparent manner. But I think those are the 2 key ones, you know, based on where we are today.
Graham, you come from a service organisation. So which capitals are most important to you?
I think what I'd like to ask Mervyn is, you know, we've talked about the generic capitals, and I think that sometimes is confusing because there are those 6, but you can break them down. But from an institute perspective, a service organisation, for us, the key capitals are around human capital, the people in the organisation, and the membership as well, and also intellectual capital. And there we're talking about things like brand and member loyalty, things of that nature. But interesting also, with our organisation, a lot of what we do is outsourced. So our capitals are, for example, our manufactured capital is vested in universities and training offices, and the people as well are also vested. So it's very much in the supply chain, which is, I think, quite an interesting. I know many organisations have that, but you know, I guess what I'm saying is that sometimes we lock ourselves into a definition of capital, but it's much broader than that.
Yeah, and what also comes under the definition of capitals, it's what you use, but it's also what consequences your business has on those capitals, because at the end of the day, it's going to affect the business because it affects things like price, availability, and quality.
Absolutely. How the company makes its money, the impacts of that is on all those capitals, and those capitals in turn start impacting on the company. Business is at the junction of the economy, society and the environment. It's just an inescapable reality. So whatever you do in your business, how you make your money, your output, is impacting on those three issues. And those three aspects impact in turn on the company. So you've got to see them as interrelated and interconnected.
And is it also important to see that how you affect the capitals and how you look after the capitals is of benefit to you, but also a benefit to your key stakeholders? Mohammed?
Absolutely. I don't know in today's environment how any company can have a strategy that's credible if they don't look across the range of capitals, how what they're doing is going to affect stakeholders. I mean, if you look at any company and the way it operates today, if you look at where we come from, we had the Enron collapses, poor governance. You have issues, and in your Mervyn and Leigh, your book, you talk about the palm oil issue with Unilever. You have relationships with stakeholders changing on a daily basis at the moment. It's being reset, the relationship business has with society. You have new risks emerging from that. So how do you present a credible strategy if you don't apply your mind to these uncertainties and risks and opportunities as you go forward?
Yeah.
And I would suggest that strategy or business plan will not be bankable if you don't look across.
Absolutely. I mean, this is business reality.
Absolutely.
But yet, Mervyn, in some cases, some businesses don't get it.
Well, I think it's a mindset change. You have to acknowledge, Leigh, we have to acknowledge, and mea culpa, we were brought up on the basis of looking at value as the present value of discounted future
Financial
cash flows.
value, yeah.
So we looked through a narrow financial lens. And as long as the cash flow was positive, we didn't really apply our minds as to how that cash flow was. Just adding on to what Mohammed has said, it's absolutely critical today to consider all these aspects, because the company is itself impacting on these aspects, and those aspects, as I said before, is impacting on the company. So strategically, you have to embed those issues into your strategy, short, medium and long term. And I believe a board that doesn't apply its mind to these issues is actually failing in its duty of care to the company. But what I've come across around the world is that companies, to attract the young generation, I call them the net generation, to a company, has to have a strategy in which they've actually attacked these issues and they're dealing with it on an integrated basis. Otherwise, you don't get buy-in from these young intellectuals.
So in our book, we refer to implementing integrated thinking in a company at three different levels: board, senior management and employees. Graham, you're doing a really interesting study of the top 60 listed companies on the JSE about how they're implementing integrated thinking. How important is it that it comes from the top?
Different companies implement it in different ways, but I think it's vital. From what we've seen, the companies that seem to be achieving the most success have a strong leadership, and also it comes from the board. Interesting also, and because we're testing it with a lot of non-executive directors, and many of them have referred to the fact that you can look at the composition of the board to see whether or not a company has actually implemented integrated thinking, and I think very much it does.
How would
come
that
from the
work?
top.
What do you mean the composition of the board?
You've got people there that understand what integrated thinking
So
is.
enlightened people.
Enlightened people, people that understand value creation, not only compliance.
Yeah. Okay. So how does a board, okay, you talk about moving away from financial value, but of course every company has to strive for profits. How do you still get profits but manage your capital at the same time?
Well, it's a question of total value. And to look at total value today from looking at it from the perspective of the responsible investor, I don't believe any investor is responsible for its ultimate beneficiaries. If it invests in the equity of a company, for example, and they don't look at how the company, the board, its collective mind has been applied to these issues in the business model of that company. because then those investors cannot draw a reasonable assessment as to the sustainability of value creation in that business longer term. So I think it's absolutely critical that they do this, and certainly from an investment point of view and a raising capital point of view, it's becoming critical around the world.
But Mohammed, the complex trade-offs between the capitals. You draw coal from the ground, you're destructing the environment, but you have to produce power for the people. What is the trade-off there?
If we go to that question, before the trade-off comes the issue you've just been discussing, and that is, how do you change the leadership conversations at the board? And leaders need to understand that in today's environment, you need to make choices about some of these difficult things. And one of the essential things that leadership need to do is help the organization manage the paradoxes of these choices, because they're not easy choices. And this is where a focused leadership can add tremendous value to a business. And leadership needs to stop thinking in terms of, and I know trade-offs is the word we use, but it's not one or the other. It's not short-term or long-term. It's what is the sustainable path that will allow us to be profitable and sustainable into the future, and how do we then align our expectations in respect of the impact on those capitals and how we use those capitals so that the trajectory is sustainable. So you can say, I want maximum profits, but I'm going to, damage the environment. Or you can say, well, if I lower my expectations of profit, I'll have it for longer, and the damage to the environment is low, and that may be a more sustainable trajectory. And that's the conversation you need to start shaping at the leadership level.
So is that the answer, Graham, that instead of a short-term view, it has to be a longer-term view?
I think absolutely it must be a longer-term view. But the question that I would ask here is, and I mean what Mohammed is saying is he's working with a complex set of factors, and many people are looking at it from the perspective of sitting around the table discussing it and measuring. Are there any techniques that you might use to actually measure the impact of these capitals on each other? Because this is a very complex situation.
And how feasible is it for a company director to not think short term when they're under so much pressure from the investors to be talking short term?
Absolutely, but you've got to think short, medium and long term. Otherwise, I believe a director is failing in his duty to the company. So what you said just now is absolutely correctly. You've got to have a long-term sustainable business plan. And if you don't have it, then it means your stakeholders can't make an informed assessment about the sustainability of the business of the company.
And we're going to a short break now, but do stay with us as there's much more on integrated thinking when we come back.
Nkonki has the professional capacity to deliver on your external and internal audit assurance requirements. Visit nkonki.com for